Hello, adventurers of all shapes and sizes! My name is Chance, and welcome to my guide. And thank you for tuning in to the first real episode of our Ancestry series. What I'm thinking for this series, just so we're all on the same page, is do an overview on the ancestry itself, then break down each independent subrace or heritage, and then after that take a look at all of the ancestry feats relevant to that particular ancestry. That's kind of what I'm thinking in my head. It follows the same format as my other channel, so it should work out pretty good. But pushing that aside, let's dive in. So we're going to be talking about the dwarf today, which has been a staple in the fantasy genre for quite some time, definitely longer than I've been around, and it doesn't look like they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. But that being said, let's take a look at how they're viewed in the eyes of Pathfinder 2e. So the game has a lot of recommendations or suggestions for ways you might want to portray your character. So you might strive to uphold your personal honor no matter the situation. Appreciate quality craftsmanship in all forms and insist upon it for all your gear. Not waver or back down once you've set your mind to something. This follows, for the most part, the traditional view of dwarves. They are very much strong believers in meritocracy. That is so far as to say, if you are good at your craft, and if it is well known that you put quality, effort, and skill into your work, you are likely to gain a dwarf's respect. And I think this matches with that absolutely perfectly. They're also quite pragmatic as well, so if something serves an amazing function, they're likely to be rather interested in it. But let's move on to how the world views the dwarfs. So the book suggests that others probably see you as stubborn, though whether they see it as an asset or a determinant changes from one person to the next. They assume you are an expert in all matters relating to stonework, mining, precious metals, and gems, or they recognize the deep connection you have with your family, heritage, and friends. I think all of these are rather fair for how a commoner may view dwarves. I think that's fair. Naturally, I would also make the assertion that other regions geographically would have different viewpoints on the dwarfs relative to that area's past history and current relationship with them. That being said, fair place to start. I really do like it. Let's move on. The physical description of the dwarves has always been pretty consistent for the most part. I can't really think of any outliers. So dwarves are typically short and stocky, about a foot shorter than most humans. They are wide, have compact bodies, and burly frames. They pride themselves on the length of their hair, which I've actually read in a couple different fantasy novels. Not too sure about the origin of it, but it is pretty cool. And they typically reach physical adulthood around the age of 25 and live to around 350 years, which is incredible. I really like that age range because it certainly seems to imply a long-lived adventuring career as well. By this, what I mean is, if the age is 25 when they reach adulthood, that's typically when they're gonna start adventuring, and they don't pass on from old age until 350 years, it's a pretty fair stretch of the imagination to be able to say that they would have been on the road for well over 100 years at that point. Another cool assumption that you can make from that age range is that they spend hundreds of years perfecting their craft. And at the end of their lives that span multiple centuries, they pass it on to the next of kin or the next generation in general. I think that's incredible. So you could potentially have dwarves that have crafts and techniques that have been passed down for so long that it might predate several empires. Very cool stuff. I really do like it. Pathfinder 2e, you did a great job, Paizo. Really love it. Let's move on to how their society might interact. So in the world of Pathfinder 2e, the ancient surface empire of the dwarves fell a long time ago, primarily because of orc and goblinoid enemies. Needless to say, might be some bad blood there, to say the least, especially amongst the more traditional dwarves, and given their long lifespan, there's bound to be quite a few of them. The dwarves have retained many ancient qualities, namely fierceness, grumpton, and stubbornness in endeavors ranging from battle to craftsman to forging ties with family and friends. I really do love this. Once again, I think it lends itself to just building a culture of hard work. Once again, very much a meritocracy, maybe a little bit of pragmatism in there, but for the most part, very strong-willed, very determined, and overall quite respectable, I'd say. Few dwarves are seen without their clan dagger strapped to their belt. This dagger is forged just before dwarves' birth and bears the gemstone of their clan. It's also what's used to cut the dwarven umbilical cord. It's kind of a ceremonious thing. Now, this is the first time I've actually heard about this. Don't know if it exists in other fantasy genres. Not to the best of my knowledge, but it might be in a little bit obscure circles. I don't know. Let me know down beneath. Regardless, this is super cool. Losing this dagger could have huge ramifications for the dwarfs and might actually be a reason why one's on an adventure. I think that'd be a great plot hook, and for those game masters out there with parties who are typically hard to get to follow a narrative, like it's usually an uphill battle, this could be a great way of adding some serious incentive and urgency to whatever quest you have in mind for them. Needless to say, pretty cool overall. I really like the way that 2E frames up the dwarves. Now let's take a look at their alignment and their religion. The dwarfs typically are lawful good or lawful neutral and prefer to worship deities in those alignments. Toreg, the god of dwarven kind, is the dwarf's primary deity, although worships of Toreg's family members are also common, which is really cool to consider. Toreg is considered to be the father of creation, and he is the god of the forge, protection, and strategy. Very cool stuff, worshipped by the dwarves and treasure crafters as well. I'd make an argument that there might be crafts guilds or craftsman guilds dedicated to Toreg, or at least have him in some facet of them. Very cool stuff. Looking at his edicts, they're pretty much just representative of the dwarves. Be honorable and forthright, keep your word, respect the forge, serve your people. Really what we've been talking about so far, especially with those strong family and cultural bonds. Under his anathema, it's tell lies or cheat someone, intentionally create inferior works, or show mercy to the enemies of your people. Very cool stuff. I like it. Honestly, it works really well with the dwarven culture. It's almost a mirror of it, I dare say. Now let's get on to their naming conventions. When introducing themselves, dwarves tend to list their family and clan, plus any number of other familial connections and honorifics. Dwarven names usually contain hard consonants and are rarely more than a few syllables. So, I got a personal gripe about a lot of fantasy names, and that is a lot of them are relatively hard to pronounce or sound incredibly similar. Now, it's great to have a dwarven relevant name, especially if you want to build an immersive world. Just make sure everyone can pronounce it, and make sure someone else in the group doesn't have the exact same name or something very similar, because it just leads to unnecessary confusion, in my opinion. But that's more of a call for your game master. All I can do is kind of recommend best practice. Now let's get on to the good stuff, their mechanics. So the dwarves, as with most ancestries, actually have quite a bit to go over. So their starting hit points is 10, their movement speed is 20 feet, size is medium, ability boost, constitution, 1 to wisdom, and a free boost as well. They do have an ability flaw that is charisma. Under languages, they start out with Common and Dwarven, and then they gain additional languages equal to your intelligence modifier, so long as it's positive. You can choose from Gnomish, Goblin, Jotun, Orcish, Turan, Undercommon, and any other languages which you might have access, such as the languages prevalent in your region, which is really cool. Great idea. Under traits, you'll see Dwarf and Humanoid. So that's about it for the main mechanics. They do have a special trait though, so let's check that out. That special trait is Dark Vision. You can see in darkness and dim light just as well as you can see in bright light, though your vision in darkness is in black and white. Really cool stuff that really makes sense because they're going to be in those deep caves. Lighting might not be the best thing for them. Really great stuff. That being said, that's really about it for the dwarf overview. Covered a lot of stuff. Hopefully you gained a lot of benefits from it, or really just helped give you a couple ideas about how you're going to roleplay your character. That being said, let me know what you think of them down beneath in the comments section. I'm always curious to hear from you guys. That being said, I hope you all have a great day, and as always, happy adventuring.